This week on Maker Update, Donald and I close out the year by wrapping up our favorite projects, tools, and trends from all of 2023.
Tyler, thank you for joining me. We're doing our year-end recap episode, and if you've never joined us for one of these, this is where Tyler and I, you get to learn a little bit more about Tyler and I, because this is going to be an unscripted episode where we're just going to go and look back on some of our personal favorite projects from the year. And these aren't projects that are the best projects because of their technical merit or any other barometer other than Tyler and I just picked our personal favorites that we're remembering from the year and maybe have some larger significance.
These are just the ones that really stuck in our minds. So this is kind of more of our personal take on things. And of course, because this is live, you get less of our scripted voices and more of our stream of consciousness, or stream of conversation voices.
You already got my opening ramble. That's a treat in and of itself. So let's get going. Let's talk. I'll start it off with AdNose by Adnan Aga. And this was one of the first projects of the year that I remember seeing and just being utterly delighted by. And if there is a theme I feel like that's unique to this year, with this project, it's that I got to really see some interesting possibilities with AI in maker projects and DIY projects that seem to really redefine what's possible in user interaction. So the project, real quick, it's an art project. It's a giant nose. In fact, it's a scaled up version of Adnan's nose. And you place an object underneath it for it to smell, and then the nose, the interaction is the nose kind of starts making sound and sniffs it and asks you to put the object on the table so it can get a good whiff, and then it creates poetry on that tells you about the smell of that particular object, and then it prints out down one nostril like a receipt printout of the poem it composed about the smell of the object. And it's silly and fun, but it's also really interesting in the sense that there's no smell technology going on there, but what it's really doing is doing image recognition down one nostril, a camera pointing down at the thing you're holding underneath it. It's identifying the object, or trying to, and then it's uploading that object and querying ChatGPT to write a poem about what it thinks this object smells like, and then it writes the poem, prints that out, but it also sends that poem to a synthetic voice AI technology that is reading it out in this gravelly, amazingly realistic actor's voice. And so there's that other AI aspect of it too, of this kind of on-the-fly voiceover, AI voiceover actor aspect that I thought was really interesting. When you boil down a lot of projects, you're really boiling it down to what interactions do you have? What ways do you interact with whether it's a robot or an artwork or so many of the things. Even when you're writing code, so much of that is about input and output, right? And so this to me was an example of AI actually introducing for all of us some different types of input and output that could be used in future projects. And so I was excited about that. Also, it's a silly, memorable project,
but a fun one.
Yeah, for sure. All right, you want to kick us over to your next one?
Yeah, so my first one, this one is part of this year's 2023 Hackaday Prize, and it's called Jumperless by Architeuthis Flux. And this takes one of the, if you start learning to prototype electronics, you're going to use some kind of solderless breadboard at some point, more than likely. Mm-hmm. And the frustrating thing, solderless breadboards are super easy to use. That's one of the things that's great about them. But when you start getting a little bit complex, they start getting really messy looking, particularly with a bunch of jumper wires, which gets to be a pain when you need to start troubleshooting your circuit. So what Jumperless is it is a standard breadboard with an Arduino Nano living up at the top of it. And that Arduino Nano is in charge of controlling a number of ICs that live below the surface of the breadboard. And it manages all the connections between all the other points on the breadboard. So you can create virtual jumper wires between different components on the breadboard in software without having to get this huge messy jumble of jumper wires that will cause headaches for you when you need to start troubleshooting your circuit. And in Creighton's project, he even did one better with it by creating a grid of LEDs below the surface of each hole in the breadboard so that you can also color in the LEDs so you have a visual representation of your virtual jumper wires as well. It's kind of an example of one of those things of using cool technology to solve a problem that's kind of already been solved, except that, I mean, who knows? I was aspirational when I was talking about this earlier this year, but maybe this could be the future of breadboards, because I could see how this could be a lot less frustrating and a lot easier to use for somebody who's just starting out and easily gets flustered by a ton of visual confusion when trying to figure out what's going wrong with their circuit.
Yeah, I can see it. I think it's great that something like this exists or is coming out, and it exists to fill a void that was there that we almost kind of we took for granted that was there. And I don't know if I'd say it as the future of breadboarding, but I do think it's for people who, can want a different way to think about it, and want all the optimizations that come with going from breadboard and scaling that project to like a PCB or something else, or be able to see the circuit in a different way. I think it's a helpful, useful tool. But for somebody like myself, I see this as like, oh, there's other complications, and there's other aspects, or there's a software complication for the breadboarding that could be like a roadblock. I don't know, for me, and where I've come from, and I might just be the stick in the mud breadboard guy, but like I need to feel those connections and know it. But I could be converted.
There is definitely a physical satisfaction of plugging wires into stuff and unplugging them and replugging them. There's definitely something to be said for that, and I think I would miss that too. But
I also what I like about this a lot is the idea of, I think it kicks you over into like the Walkwe visualization, like circuit board visualization, which also has like a code component. So to be able to have the circuit breadboarded, be able to make adjust your connections in software, and be able to run your code and flash your code to the board all from like the same dashboard. There is something cool about that you don't really get with having them all in these separate universes.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, creative people like to work in a lot of different ways. And if this kicks down a few doors for a few different people, then that's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly my point. Yeah, good one, Tyler. I'm excited about that and see where that goes. Let's go to another project. I've got Animas by Bureau Moeilijke Dingen, which was one of my favorite. I want to say author names, but it's actually a studio. It's a design studio that came up with this one, and it's like a. I'm so used to, in my electronic music making days, dealing entirely in software. I think this ties into the Jumperless like debate too. I'm gotten so accustomed to working in software or even making music with an array of little desktop boxes. This takes the idea of a dashboard to its fullest extent. And it's an electronic music production workstation, beautifully designed. That is, it takes up. It's like you'll see it on screen. It's like a full Star Trek Enterprise like dashboard, right? And it's and again, it's another project that comes with a dash of AI technology, or in this case more like recommendation technology, right? But in the music sphere. So the system starts with like a record that you place, which is more of like what they call like the inspiration zone, where you kind of choose almost like a preset by this record that you put on, which is really a tag, like an RFID tag that signals to the console what kind of genre you're going to be playing with. And then there's a beat selection where you're coming up with a particular pattern or a bank of different patterns for the drum beat and the rhythm. And then there's a melody section where you're actually defining or trying to steer the melody. And that section, more than any of the others, has this AI recommendation component in it that will, once you've kind of come up with something you like, it will assist you in taking that to different directions or finding a different chord change or doing something that you might not otherwise have anticipated, and move the whole thing along. So not only is it like a cool piece of music production gear, but it's this immersive kind of music tinkering experience that has this AI assistant tech built into it.
It's almost like the design for this is create a console that looks like what a layperson to electronic music thinks an electronic music console should look like. You know,
right.
It's this cool thing you stand at that looks like a Star Trek control panel, and it's full of buttons. And the AI is working behind the scenes to make sure that you feel the way you should feel standing at that console. With, you know, you push a button, you interact with it, and it just makes more cool music.
And I think that's a good point. This isn't going to be the technology that, you know, Aphex Twin's going to be using to make his next album. Like it's really, the bumpers are on for anyone to walk in and be able to make something that's pretty groovy and it not to go off the rails, right? But I do feel like that's part of the cool aspect of this, is that anyone can jump into this experience, flip a few switches, and feel like they're in charge of and successfully directing the course of a song, and it's just beautifully made. You know, just to see the actual B-roll footage of the whole thing working. It's like, that would be fun. I'd like a ticket to be able to walk into that room and screw around with the music for a little while.
Absolutely.
All right, with that, take us to our next project, Tyler.
So our next project is a Airworthy wooden propeller created by Xyla Foxlin. And over the course of the year, you could probably tell Xyla Foxlin's one of our favorite makers. She makes tons of amazing projects. Personally, I'm incredibly intimidated and inspired by anything that you can make that then you need to have your life depend on, because it's the thing that's carrying you through the air. And she does quite a few of those. But the thing that I want to talk about this one isn't necessarily the propeller itself. That's cool enough on its own. I mean, wooden propellers are just cool. But rather the machine that she shows in this video that creates the rough profile of the propeller shape. Because the way the process works is that, so she went to a place somewhere in the U.S., I can't remember exactly where, but a place that manufactures wooden propellers and has a great reputation for that. And so they take a blank propeller that has all these different profile shapes, you know, for how much air it displaces through a single rotation, whether it's clockwise or counterclockwise, and they load it into the machine. It's a lathe, sort of. They load it into the top part of the lathe, and then it uses sort of like a cam follower to follow the profile of the propeller shape as it rotates it, and then the propeller shape that you're cutting, the propeller shape that you're matching from the template, is loaded into the bottom, and then it just little by little moves like a circular saw or a saw blade that looks sort of like a handheld circular saw. Right. On this armature that's like sort of pantograph armature that follows the exact same profile. It looked like a really old style of machine, but you know, just a machine that can create a 3D one-to-one duplicate of another object that, you know, as long as it has the detail to follow it, it can create an exact match of that. And then,
Yeah.
of course, then you have to do a ton of sanding after that. But it was just so cool to see that machine and never know something like that existed and see what it does and understand how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that part of the video where you see, what they're doing is they're making this complex curve, right? And it's complex in all these different ways as it twists through the propeller shape. And to think about how someone had to come up with that technology, that manufacturing technique, so long ago to be able to replicate these propeller shapes consistently over and over and over again. And then even after that's done, after the rough shape is made, that the sanding that has to happen to have it be perfectly balanced. I hadn't thought about that, how these propellers just standing still have to be balanced, because once they start moving, if there's any kind of centrifugal weight to throw things off, it's a disaster, right?
It was a really fun process video.
Yeah, from Xyla this year in general, there's been a lot of great content. It's been exciting to watch. Next up, Geng and the Handmade Bunny Air Humidifier, which doesn't quite capture how amazing and bizarre this particular project is. He made essentially like a ride-on cart shaped like a giant bunny that shoots kind of like fog machine vapor out of its tail end, and you can ride it around and steer it with your feet, and it has speakers built into the ears. And the process in general, I love watching this guy work. It's the kind of engineering that I think I could actually muster, which is not precise. It's fast and loose. It's tack welds and just working on the shop floor as quickly as you can to get the project done. And it's great to watch him work and see what he comes up with. And this project in particular, to see like the ribbing technique he does around the kind of basic steel frame, like it's one motor, one axle with the gear to kind of make it work, and like a simple kind of tire for the steering in the front. But then the rest of it, the actual bunny body that he's riding on top of, to see him create that with all the different ribbing, and then he hammers out all the different sheeting to like fill it out so that you're not just falling down through the ribbing, and then he covers it all with bunny fur. And then at the very end, there's the surprise is that not only did he make one of these, but he made like 5 identical versions of them in this using the same technique. And you get to see he and his friends all ride around on these crazy fog machines, shooting bunnies. It was, again, delightful and an aspirational project for me too, as someone who does enjoy playing around with making little electric go-karts. This is like the next level where you're going to be making something to take in the parade. I like to think as makers, the spirit of Wile E. Coyote lives in all of us to some degree. We all kind of aspire to that, of kind of the harebrained engineering. I think Geng does a great job of like actually putting that on the screen in front of us. And seeing the way he works, of just like, I've got a big pile of scrap metal, I've got a welder, we can make anything. And quick wire joints, and now you have speakers and a motor connection, and now it's rideable, and now it's insane. There is, I'm just thinking about this now, there is like a Duresta-like quality to like the way he works, like just setting up a camera, and like you're just going to see me do this technique that maybe you've never seen before, or you've never seen it done this way, and then it just is stitched together. It comes together in front of your eyes. But instead of it more being like Duresta woodworking, it's this scrappier, more welding intensive projects, and I really enjoy his stuff. But that one in particular, it's hard to not remember the giant riding speaker-eared bunny that shoots fog out of its butt. That was a great one. All right, what's next? What do you got?
So I discovered this motorized mini jib by Digital Bird. And again, the mini jib itself, so a jib is a as a camera tool that you use that you could create, kind of arcing or craning motions. It's sort of like the same sort of tool you might get to use to get like drone-like shots in places where it's impractical or impossible to fly a drone, especially because if you're working close to people or something like that. And this is motorized, so it can create automated and repeatable motions. But the other cool thing about this is that this is really just the tip of the iceberg of the sort of motion control projects that he creates, because he's created this entire ecosystem of camera sliders and pan tilt heads and focusing motors and jib arms and all sorts of other things. And he's created this entire ecosystem and even just sort of a small cottage business around it. And really the thing that he produces is he produces a PCB with sockets for stepper motor controllers and a ESP32 based microcontroller that just plugs right into it. And also a controller interface that you can use that connects to the system wirelessly, again, for using the ESP32. And so then from there, he uses that to create these camera sliders and these pan tilt heads. And the way he creates his kits is that he sells directly the stuff that only he makes, and then creates a bill of materials for stuff that is commodified and easy to order, things like the bearings, the hardware, the stepper motors, all the easy stuff that's been solved by lots of other people. And they're pretty much just the same stepper motors that might go into your 3D printer. Same with the stepper motor drivers. And the rest, you 3D print yourself, because 3D printing has become commodified. And it's just so cool to see. I mean, as somebody who has done a bunch of camera motion control projects and also realized that maybe I don't have all the time to do all the things that I want to create with it, sometimes it's nice to see, somebody else has solved that problem, but I still get to feel like I'm a little bit involved in making it because I'm still putting it all together. And also, because it's a sort of DIY or kit project, it's a lot more accessible price-wise than the professional stuff. This was a really cool find for me personally. And it was cool to see that sort of approach to how you can make something and also produce it as sort of a product.
Yeah, I think it's beautifully done. Like, I love it when I see a kit or project like this where someone definitely has spent a lot of time to not just get it working, but have it be something that if you were to break this out at a shoot, that it wouldn't, no one would feel bad for you. It looks really nice, right? And it gets the job done, and it opens up more flexibility and possibilities than you might have otherwise.
All right, we have one last one for you today. Although, we had a couple of others that didn't quite make the cut. They'll be in the show notes. Check those out as well. But the last one we wanted to talk about, is the Omnifixo soldering stand. And I saw this in a video from Tested earlier this year, and immediately I decided, you know what? I think I need to give this one a try. As someone who does a good bit of soldering, I've always stuck by the old standby of the holding hands tool. That's the one that's always worked the best for me. I probably would take one and modify it by putting a heavier base on it so it doesn't tip over as much, and maybe taking the magnifying glass off, because I find that's usually more in the way than helpful.
It tips the whole thing over oftentimes.
It makes it really top heavy, and fortunately my eyes are still mostly good, so I can see things up close. But the gooseneck ones that lots of other people love never really worked for me, because I would try and get two wires position, and I would let go of the jaws, and then they would kind of snap back a little bit once I released the tension on them, and that always frustrated me. So this is a small platform, a small magnetic platform that sits on your workbench. It's like 4 by 7 inches. It's a decent working area. And what it does well is it has these 4 magnetic posts you can easily position anywhere you want on this platform. And then it has a ball joint above that, and then this little spring-loaded armature that you can use to grab onto your wires. The nice thing is that the jaws for it are flat, so you don't get the alligator teeth marks that you might get from a helping hands tool. And you get 4 of them, and you can even stack them on top of each other to create a bunch of really unique armatures to hold on to whatever you're soldering. You can have 2 jaws to hold on to your PCB, and then 2 more to hold on to the wires that you need to solder into it. It just gives you a ton of different options for how you can hold it, a lot of flexibility in ways you can use it to work. And it's also really easy and fun to use, which, maybe fun isn't something you need in your soldering work, but it certainly doesn't hurt when, you're approaching a soldering project, even a really arduous one, like I've got to desolder a bunch of connections and make a new one. At least having a fun tool to work with makes that a lot easier.
Yeah, I think it kind of falls into that same category of like Jumperless, which we'd mentioned earlier at the top of the show, where it's a tool that maybe we all took for granted, that there isn't all the interesting ways to solve that problem had been done. But here comes another option that it really looks like for some people in some projects makes a lot more sense. All right, Tyler, I think we did it. This has been a great year. It's been a lot of fun covering Maker Update and all the projects with you throughout the year. And I want to thank everyone who has been watching the show and helping us keep things going over on the DigiKey channel. Big thanks to DigiKey, of course, for keeping this show going. We love doing it. And if you ever have any interesting ideas on how we can make the show better, Tyler and I are all ears and interested in keeping this interesting for all of you. So let us know. Everybody have a happy new year, and we'll keep a Maker Update rolling into 2024, and we'll see you there. Thanks a lot.